there's really good conversations going on today too. So thank you guys for being here. I think we can give it a few more minutes before we officially get started. But my thought was, this is really an opportunity. You each are addressing scaling food distributions from very different perspectives, which is why we wanted to bring you together. So I'll give you each a chance, really you can, 10 minutes or so to get started to share about you can share sort of your story and your approach, individual narrative, and then we'll have an opportunity to sort of dialogue, I'll ask questions, etc. And then we can also take Q&A as people come through. So that is the basic idea. How does that sound to everybody? And I'll introduce you guys and once. So we'll give it, and thank you to the people who are here already, because you can tell when people are watching. We will get started in just a minute. Where are you all tuning in from? Where are you located?
New Brunswick, Canada.
Oh, you're the Canada. I could see that we had 4 countries. We had the US, Canada, Ireland, and New Zealand. So thanks for joining us from Canada.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. And Nancy?
I'm in Omaha, Nebraska right now.
Wonderful. Awesome. Yeah. And Gabe, do you prefer Gabriel? Gabe?
I go by Gabe. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Whatever's easiest for people.
Want to make sure. And where are you calling in from?
I'm from Austin. I'm right in Austin, Texas. Yeah.
Welcome. We can be locals. Fantastic. I'm based in Austin, Texas also, where Joy is also. That's how we know each other. Fantastic. What have you got? We're just going to give it a few more minutes because, 2 more minutes because I think it'll take a little bit for people to wander through. Have you had favorite discussions or thoughts or anything from the day so far?
I think it's just a resounding, food security, but food system is all tied together. From helping new farmers get in, farming, how is that accessible, all the way to consumer waste, and 50% of the waste comes from the consumer and everything in between. So I really like the food as medicine mindset, which is it's healthcare. So if you look at it that way, it changes your perspective, and I think that's something we need to push more, for sure.
Absolutely. What about Nancy or Gabe? Any other sessions that you liked?
Yeah, I really liked the lunch session with Amy Bell. I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, it's very relevant for where I'm at, I think, with Good Apple as well, because I think, investment is like so huge for solving a lot of these issues. And, talking about the issues is super important, but the way to address it is to do things. And a lot of times that depends on finding capital and finding resources and finding people that come together and help you do it. So I thought that perspective of what does it take to actually get out there and start trying to affect the changes that we talk about was really helpful for me. And I think probably for a lot of people too.
Absolutely.
Gabe, do you run your business as a nonprofit or is it social enterprise? Or?
It's a social venture, yeah. So we run as a for-profit for now. That's kind of the idea, is that we wanted to try to affect food insecurity from the market perspective and give people an option for, your food isn't just your own, but it's also, everyone else. Everyone's got to eat. And if you have, the ability and the means and the desire to help other people, you can do so. And we wanted to provide that option for people without, taking resources away from a bunch of other really good organizations that also address food insecurity.
Well, let's do a deep dive. I'd love to start it with giving everybody, I know people wander in and out of the sessions, give everybody an opportunity to share a little bit about your story. So we'll have an opportunity to really go in deep, how you end up here too. And we'll start with Frederick too. So you could share your name, about your organization, and how, what you guys are up to, how you are addressing the issue of scaling food distribution, and what your work is.
Okay, so my name is Frédéric Laforge. I'm, we're based out of Canada. We also have we've grown, and now we're in California as well. We start my background is product design. I have been in the tech business for quite some time, and was looking for something bring me back close to home. I grew up on the farm. Food is something that's dear to my heart, and social justice as well. So I had a challenging past when I was a kid, when the detox, quit school, the dumpster diving, the whole thing. So I've seen both sides of I don't know, challenges and being in the system and not being able to. So Farmer's Truck started as a mobile farmers market. I had this guy came into my office who wanted a brand for his farm. We started talking about his ideas, and next thing you know, we're saying, "Hey, let's do a mobile trailer farm stand," and it grew to be a food truck for fruits and vegetables. So we did that for about 3 years, and then we were trying to do a for-profit. The ideal is be good and do good, and so that was really challenging with our short growing season, winter, all that stuff. Really difficult to make ends meet. We made a killing in the summer, and in the winter we bled everything we made. So we decided to pivot, and it turns out I spent quite a bit of time designing the truck. So it's a good experience for the shopper, good experience for the operator. And now basically we help organizations from coast to coast to coast in Canada and the US to start these mobile market programs. Brooklyn, California, Sacramento, Louisiana, we're at some customers in soon to be Vancouver and all these places. So it's now I feel like it's exploding. We're the only one who's doing this, like we're providing a vehicle like that, and we're working on a mobile market university to help people do procurement, merchandising, and so there's a lot of, it's a retail store, so you need to learn how to do that and be good at it. And so yeah, that's us in a nutshell.
Sorry, how many mobile markets do you have?
So far, we've sold about 20, but we have more orders coming in, and yeah, it's pretty crazy because we this really took off during the pandemic. Like it's just the pandemic kind of made that much clearer that food insecurity was an issue. We wouldn't exist if there wasn't an issue. So in the perfect world, we wouldn't exist. So, but
absolutely. So 20. And then in that, has that growth been over the course of just this past year, or?
We officially started selling these trucks in 2019.
So in the past 2 years. That's incredible.
Yeah, and we have well over 300 organization that wants to start a mobile market. So we're trying to help them, set up their program. We do fundraising with them. We do grant writing. We do essentially we look at it from a holistic standpoint and what can we do to help these programs, because our vision is fresh, accessible food in every community. And so if we empower these food security champions to launch these programs, then essentially we're achieving our vision.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you for giving that oversight. And then you guys, after we go through the introductions, we'll let you be able to ask questions to each other. And to everybody who's just joined us, I see that the main session has clearly come to an end because our group size grew. We're here going to be talking. We have 3 incredible entrepreneurs with us. We're going to be sharing their perspectives and their experiences and their wisdom and how do we scale food distribution? How do we get the food to the people? So we just heard from Frederic Laforge, and now we'll hear from Nancy Williams. Nancy, please take some time. Tell us about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Frederic. It sounds like you made the pivot and you set up a perfect volley in 2019 to be able to respond to the need in 2020. So kudos to you for being ready and being able to respond to that need. My name is Nancy Williams. I serve as the co-founder and president and CEO for No More Empty Pots. And we are a nonprofit based in Omaha, Nebraska. And the work we do is around connecting people to resources for a more resilient and economically sound and just food system. And there's a lot of components in this. I will give like the quick snapshot of, we started this organization in 2010 in response to a community meeting where about 50 people showed up and said that they wanted to see more support for urban agriculture and a shared use kitchen that they could rent by the hour to start and grow food businesses. And we spent the next few months talking to whomever was interested. We met once a month on a Saturday, and we would get together, usually about 10 people, not always the same folks, and learn that there was a greater need and interest in doing something even bigger than just those two things. A big need was around education and people understanding where food came from and how to have more of that sovereignty around the food that they ate and what they wanted to see in our neighborhoods. In November of 2010, we had a second summit. About 120 people showed up. The things that we were trying to do is map the system, see who was doing the work, and try to bring everybody in so that we were working together to get to what we wanted to see for ourselves and for our neighbors. And as a result of what we were being asked to do as this ad hoc volunteer group, we decided to apply for 501c3 status and become like this organizer, project manager in the middle of this. The next 3 years, we met with whomever was interested and decided the best way to satisfy the need of equitable access to healthy food, educational opportunities, economic development, and training that supported living wage jobs was to create a food hub where people could experience the sectors of the food system from production, processing, distribution, consumption, and recycling under one roof, so we could understand the interdependencies and what happens when we pulled out the waste and recentering that value on people. And so it is 2021. It took us 9 years to build this food hub, and we did it in phases. But June 2019, we finished it. There are 4 licensed commercial kitchen spaces. There is a cafe, there's a rooftop garden, there's a kids kitchen with 12 stations for hands-on experiential learning. There's a kitchen for entrepreneurs to start and grow businesses. We've had 8 of them since 2020 to go out on their own lifetime. We've had about 12 of them to do that. And we also have a workforce training program that's in cohort 14 right now. So we have a lot of partners. We don't do this alone, but this is the beginning of that ultimate outcome of helping people become more self-sufficient and building community wealth building opportunities with the community.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds like an incredible journey that you've been on for the past 11 years. And then especially including, I'll be interested to hear, how COVID has shifted things for both of you, and then recapping too, because Frederick, you started when we were so naive back in 2019, barely starting, and then not getting thrown. And then Nancy, you know, how that shifted the landscape. So really, really fantastic and really interesting. And so I'm very excited about this. Okay, awesome. Gabe, share with us about your organization.
Totally. Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to both of y'all. I think there's a lot of very interesting things to hear from both of you. So I'm just excited to be a part of this. Sorry, my name is Gabe. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Good Apple. We're local to Austin, a produce delivery service, and our goal is to end food insecurity in Austin. We started out also in 2019 as a coalition between some medical students at the UT Del Med School and local Austinites like myself. And the idea was, could we do something to impact some of these social determinants of health that we know are so important, but don't generally get addressed by healthcare as we traditionally experience it? And, you know, the big one that we identified and thought we could make a difference was food insecurity. Following the theme of the conference, really, that food is healthcare and everyone should have access to both food and healthcare. So that's kind of how we started out. The idea was to start a 1-for-1 produce delivery service, kind of modeled off of the Bombas and the Toms of the world, just making it simple for people. The idea is that for every box of produce that we would sell and we deliver it and bring it to your door, we would do the same thing for someone that's facing food insecurity. And, you know, part of the reason we wanted to do it that way is that, at least in Austin, but I know in several other parts of the country as well, food insecurity isn't just a problem of, economics or, myriad other things. One huge aspect of it is transportation and access. And we realized that, that was going to be a big part that we wanted to address that a lot of other organizations didn't really do as much of. I mean, in Austin alone, there's like plenty of food pantries. There's more food pantries in Austin than almost any other city in Texas. There's lots and lots of food here, but accessing it is still a problem, especially when there's geographic inequalities, and it's just harder for some people to get around. So anyway, long-winded way of saying that's why we wanted to focus specifically on the transportation aspect of food insecurity through this one-for-one model. So we started doing that in 2019, just a group of friends really just trying to get something off the ground. And then very quickly, when the pandemic started and the lockdowns hit, all of the delivery services, in Austin and probably across the country as well, saw a huge growth in demand. And that's really when we had to figure out how to scale. And that's when we cut our teeth and learned very quickly, like, the things that we needed to do to make sure that we could still bring food, not only to our paying customers, but to the people that we had committed that we would bring food to for free. And not only was there a huge spike in demand for people trying to get food, just to buy it, but also, of course, lots of people that fell into food insecurity as, a knock-on effect of the pandemic as well. So, we learned a ton going through all of that. I guess I could go on and on, but I'll take I'll take a pause there. But yeah, that's sort of where Good Apple is at now.
That's great. And I actually want to say too, also because you're in my hometown, but I've had friends who have received meals because of the one-for-one model for it. So I'm very appreciative of the work that you guys do.
That's awesome.
We're musician friends during COVID who hit it really hard. So everybody here is doing really amazing work. So part of the context of this conference when we originally started it too was like, what is the lessons learned of how do we scale, how do we distribute food during COVID? So I'm curious too, each of you having a slightly different mission, a slightly different way that you're addressing it. But over the past year, like, what have been the biggest? I mean, we all know COVID has been a big challenge, but how have you seen it impact you? And what pivots, what have you had to do to successfully be able to scale in the face of no agreement, in the face of, the things that we thought we could count on in 2019 when we got started aren't things we can count on. So we'll just do popcorn style. So like lessons, things you've had to, like, what has been essential you've had to do in order to scale during this time? I'd love to hear from whoever.
I'll
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
So we went from operating a mobile market, which is sourcing products, working with farmers, do marketing every day, every week, doing a flyer, and just the grind of running a produce business, perishables is a lot of work. So I, learning all that, and our pivot basically meant that we were going to do manufacturing all of a sudden. Have no background in manufacturing whatsoever. So learning everything about it, learning that it's, especially the truck body manufacturing world, it's a bunch of old grumpy men just banging on metal and trying to get them to buy into a social mission and like say, hey, we're going to start maybe one truck, we're going to sell maybe 2 trucks, and we're going to empower these organizations. So we did a lot of work, did a lot of research, and now, like, with all the supply chain issues, the cost of everything went up, and so that's causing a lot of issues as well. But all in all, I think when you have a social purpose and you're clear about what that is, and you're able to communicate that with your suppliers and your partners and all that stuff, your community partners, it makes a huge difference. I felt that way anyways throughout the whole pandemic. Other lessons that we've learned, I guess, our customers are really trying to this is just one of the solution. Like, there's many, like what Gabe is doing is one of the solution. There, some food banks, and we work mostly with food banks. They do these huge mobile food drives, and like basically tractor trailer, forklifts, they drop pallets of food. People drive with, like, you've seen the pictures of like the lineups, kilometers or miles of lineups. And you don't have a car, what do? You get and then oftentimes food banks are measured delivering pounds of food, and that's what that's the KPI they're working with. And so are you actually delivering something healthy? Is it high salt, high fat, super processed food, shelf stable? Well, great. I mean, yes, it's shelf stable, but I mean, some fruits and vegetable. Luckily, some customers we have in California, they're right next to, the salad bowl of, they get tons of fresh food, but others, a completely different story. They need to fundraise to buy fruits and vegetable. What they get is basically bread, peanut butter, frozen meat that's about to go bad, and so I can go on and on, but I don't know if that's
Yeah. Well, we'll give other.
Yeah.
I want to encourage the conversation too. So, who else? Like the pivots, the lessons, the challenges. Gabe.
Yeah, no, I just, it sounds like you ran a business that's very similar to the business that I am now running. So it's interesting to hear some of the things that you bring up. But I kind of echo a lot of that too. We're very fortunate here in Austin that we have farms, like enough farms that are able to produce year round that we can kind of keep up to a certain extent. But I've also noticed that as well, that we go through periods where there's a lot of really terrific stuff and everyone's very happy. And then we have periods that everyone's getting potatoes every week, and, it's hard. Like we want to try to provide, the best service for both our customers and clients alike, but it really is like somewhat at the whim of what the local food system can give us. And ours is very strong actually here in Austin. But, it does kind of create, like, having done it now for 2 years, I'm starting to see more like where things tend to fall apart, and what sorts of things like are necessary. And I think at least the learning for me from the pandemic, a big one, was like, I've already sort of talked about it a little bit, but like the importance of delivery as an option. Well, I wouldn't say it's the only option. Obviously, we want to give people more access to mobility and transportation, but delivery is sort of like that, the ability to sidestep some of the issues that exist with all of that and help us bring food to people, and not just, food, like you were saying, Frederick, about, just trying to get anything out there to divert waste, but it's also about getting people things that are healthy. When we started, that was kind of our whole goal, is to try to not only, feed people that needed food, but to feed them good food so that it would improve their health. That's our ultimate goal, is we want to improve our health. And I think, being able to bring food to people that can't access it otherwise, and also having it be good food, is, our thesis is that it really makes a difference.
And I speak with like our customers, and I'm like, okay, so there's in the world of food insecurity or food desert, food apartheid, or food oppression, the concept of poverty obviously is throughout these, but there's a good chunk of these individuals, these households, who have a bit of money. They're still working. They're working poor, but the dignity of buying your own food is such a big piece of the pie. Like, there's definitely a group that has no money, that needs food. Oh, y'all dog in the background now. There's definitely a group that needs food, that's hungry, that doesn't have money. Yes, absolutely, let's feed them. And unfortunately, unless you've raised money, you get the food that you have. So at least you're feeding someone. But for the rest, what if we had a model like, a lot of our customers are doing basically a break-even model. They just sell the food just enough to cover some of their expenses, sometimes most of their expenses. And food is super affordable. $5, you get out of there with 2 bags full of fruits and vegetables. I mean, you get everything for your whole family. You get the dignity of buying something. It's no longer just a program for, people struggling. It's a community program. It's wellness. It changes the perspective.
I love that. There's a few things I'm going to want to come back to too. One, the theme of the collaboration in scaling food systems. Two, the piece about like the dignity of the human piece and the dignity when scaling. Also, I want to step back come back to those, but I want to first also sort of give Nancy an opportunity to sort of share lessons and pivots and things as the founder who had 8 years of growing a nonprofit, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and growing a nonprofit, doing nonprofit work is hard, even in the best of circumstances.
Yes, in the best of circumstances, and there's a lot of things that we all had to do. There are commonalities in there. I helped co-found the organization, but I didn't start working. I was a volunteer until 2016. In 2016, I came on to serve as the president and CEO. But I've been doing like the fund development and all of that in the background, served on the board, and that worked. And so it was already like a hump to get over. And I thought, okay, we're there, like we got our legs. And then COVID happened. We already had a program called Community Harvest, which is one of our first programs where we started the CSA using food from local farmers. And it's had different iterations over the year. And so in March of 2020, we had just finished, the hub renovation and building everything out. June 2019, we'd opened the cafe in July. The programs are up and going. March 2020, March 13th, we closed our doors to the public, and they've been closed to the public since then. We just have it open for certain events, and people come in on a limited basis because we're just not there with COVID and trying to make sure everybody is safe. But the big shift was with Community Harvest. We were serving about 300 meals per month. We were doing about 100 CSAs per month. It was small scale. We had the equivalent of 2 FTEs doing that work, supplying customers. By the end of March, so in 2 weeks, we had served like 550 meals, and we were doing 50 CSAs per week. By the summer, in August, we were doing 3,000 meals per week. And we were no longer doing all of the other programs that were under the umbrella. Everybody had a shift in the kitchen or packing vegetables or pulling things in. And it was so much collaboration going on among the teams and the team within the organization to make sure that we were finding out who needed the food, getting the food in, because you've got to order everything a week ahead. So you're balancing that. We are preparing the foods. We went all plant-based because of all of the dietary preferences and restrictions. It was just easier to say it's plant-based. So we only had to deal with a few allergens and restrictions, and we had to make exceptions for fewer meals. We had an emergency response program called Feeding Our Neighbors that we had activated a year before when we had neighbors who were displaced all of a sudden. And so we just reactivated that program and went into emergency food relief mode. We stopped doing Community Harvest, switched to Feeding Our Neighbors, started applying for funding and getting donations so that if you have funds and you want to pay for it, you could pay what you could. If you had SNAP, you could pay that. And we used Double Up Food Bucks partner with UNL, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, to match that. But then if you couldn't cover anything, we got you. There's people in the community that were covering those costs, and we were using care funds to do that. By the end of the year, there were 51,000 meals distributed in 48 different zip codes in Iowa and Nebraska. We had partners who started out delivering food for us so we could focus on getting the meal production down. And then in August, they switched over because it wasn't over yet and they had to put their attention to other projects. We activated our refrigerated truck that we had, bought a driver. We bought a driving software, and had hired someone to serve as a driver and set up the routes. Add a second person to be like the ride-along person. Over 100,000 pounds were distributed of local food, and we had increased the number of farmers we worked with to 40. And so it was just a huge collaboration with everybody that's a part of the food system that we needed to work with. But transportation, I will say, was one of the biggest issues because we then switched to everything was delivery. We had a few pickups, and we still do it on Friday and Saturdays. But because of COVID and transportation issues and people losing transportation, that delivery was the main thing that helped ensure people got food that they needed when they needed. We even had relationships with the hospitals and the clinics that would call. So they had navigation nurses that would call and sign people up to make sure that by the time they got home, the food would be there for them. So it really helped open my eyes to how we could be responsive to community need and how all of us could do what we do best and come together in that service.
That's incredible. I love the two pieces that I'm very curious about that are sort of intertwined too, are the pieces around the human dignity component, as Frederic shared too. Like, how do we scale, which, on a left-handed brain, it's like, it's numbers and this and crunch and transportation and the mechanics, but it's like, where's the human component where we scale in a way that allows people to be dignified in it and encourages the human systems. And then also this important piece of collaboration. And so I'm curious that, the next question I would look at, is what collaborations have been the most helpful and which collaborations are sort of out of reach that you wish you could collaborate with? Or if you want to talk about the human dignity component. Sorry, sometimes I ask two questions at once because I get really excited about both threads. So whichever one is most interest to you. And I would love to just, encourage you guys, thoughts, reflections. Gabe.
Yeah, well, I wanted to kind of respond to Nancy a little bit because we had a similar program too, where we pivoted early on to do an emergency food response program specifically for people affected by COVID. And I really got curious about, y'all scaled super, super quickly. And it sounds like you had some refrigerated trucks to help make some of those deliveries. That was a huge piece of what we ran into early on, is that, at a small scale, we were able to make most deliveries ourselves and do just-in-time deliveries so that the produce quality wasn't affected as much. As you start to grow, you start holding on to more inventory and you try to serve people, in different times, or, the weather changes, now it's hot. That just became a huge piece for us. And I was just curious, like, do you all have a refrigerated space at the food hub, or did you have farmers deliver to you or do pickups? I'm curious about how y'all.
Everything was happening. We'd meet farmers early to deliver early if they were on somewhere else. Some we issued key fobs so that they could let themselves in and leave it in the loading delivery area in the food hub, because it was secure once the garage door went down, and then we just put it in place when we got there. We had to shift our delivery schedule because the food would come in that we need for packing CSAs and cooking. But once we started cooking the food, you had to refrigerate it as well. And so we had to shift our scheduling of delivery, production, and packing so that you had this movement where food would come in and out and still maintain all the temps. We found nooks and crannies that we could fit freezers into. But in the winter, we were doing this huge 500 box delivery to South Sioux City, and it had local chicken, it had rosemary, potatoes, like all the things you needed for a holiday meal. And we had donors that supported that, like $30,000 to cover all of this. But we could only fit 500 boxes inside the walk-in. And at the time where we had all of the things in the hub, we couldn't fit the components outside of the boxes and the boxes at the same time. So this was like a 23-hour rotation. We had chickens on the rooftop because it was below 30 degrees. So it was our biggest freezer. And we would bring the chickens down from the rooftop and pack them and move them into the walk-in while we were pulling produce out of the walk-in and displacing with the fill boxes. And when we were getting ready to deliver the next morning, so we finished all this by 10 o'clock at night, and they're all in. But then we had to pull them out from the pallets and shrink wrap them on the pallets to fit on the truck that was going to carry them. But we didn't have a place to do that inside. So we had all of the pallets in the hallway of the food hub, and we would bring them out and put them in the alley because we still had a couple hours before the truck would show up. And that's how we got all of the pallets shrink wrapped to maintain temp and then get them onto the refrigerated truck to go. So, you have to get really creative and understand your space and have people who are willing to do really wild things with you so that you can make sure you serve. But I will tell you, it was worth it, because when I tell the story, when we got to Sioux City, which was South Sioux City is 2.5 hours away, there were people there on bicycles to pick up those boxes of food, because that was the only transportation they had to get the food that they wanted for themselves and their families.
Wow, that's incredible. I definitely relate to that. I feel like we've done a lot of scrappy things just to make sure that like the food that we buy doesn't go bad and that it gets to the people that it needs.
I think something we've underestimated was procurement and trying to find, like if you're dealing with 40 different farmers, they all want to come in at a different time, and you're like, no, delivery is this is the opening, come in here. No, and then they would get up, where's the invoice? Well, I just drew something on a piece of paper. Like, this is a napkin. Like trying to work with farmers, and I grew up on a farm. Like my dad's exact same. So old school.
Yeah, totally. I was gonna say.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I saw Richard Swain's question too. I know Nancy, you started to talk about it because it was cold where you are. We could never really do well. We could only do this in February, us in Austin. Gabe and Frederic, did you find that refrigeration was an important? You spoke to this, but opening up an important piece of a food hub collaboration.
So so we did deliveries. We had an online store. We called it the first farmers market online, and we're in our little city, and it was a big deal when we launched. And we got a delivery system, logistics system to help us like map out the best way to, and then they would text the customer. And so we really worked on the experience and make it. Refrigeration was always an issue. We shared the cooler with other companies who would like also now would come in the morning. We had, a pallet of strawberries, and then they would have put a big piece of meat on top of the pallet. And I was like, come on, like you're ruining my whole, like, and so sharing a space because we couldn't afford our own space, that was a challenge. And then refrigeration. So in the truck, like you're mobile, how do you refrigerate things without keeping the vehicle running? So we designed a system that runs off ice packs. There's these giant ice packs. It moves air around and it keeps things fresh. Anyways.
That's cool. Yeah, we had a similar thing. We share a space for our refrigeration as well, and we just kind of learned to stay out of the way and learn to like do what we need to do without getting in the way of forklifts going around. But I think it's crucial, really. You can only get so big without some refrigeration. And of course, some things, Good Apple is all produce, fruits and veggies. We don't offer meats or dairy because we don't want to risk, giving someone something that could go bad without it. So yeah, I definitely think that it's super crucial. And even like you had mentioned on the delivery piece as well, being able to deliver in a refrigerated truck allows you to do way more deliveries, way more efficiently, because you have more time before the stuff that you're delivering starts to go bad.
And one thing we do now, so we have a new model coming out, and you need to essentially imagine you're running a mobile market. You're filling up the truck every day. You're going to your market. You're coming back, and you're whatever's still good, you put it in the fridge. And so now the whole truck is insulated, and then whenever you plug it, it has a standby, so it's going to keep everything refrigerated. So it turns into a storage overnight. So you don't have to take it in, take it out. So that was a big piece that we're changing in our new design. And also I've learned that the cold chain is more or less a myth. So because you're supposed to keep it at a certain temperature, and then it gets on the truck. Well, that truck is not at the right temperature. It never is. It's not, unless you have these new European style sandwich composite panel box. And I've learned all this because I'm in manufacturing now. It's not going to keep it's barely, especially if it's really warm in places like Austin or California or whatever, like forget about it. But if you're dealing with fruits and vegetable, at least you're keeping things fresh to extend the shelf life. It's not going to make people sick. If you have, dairy or protein, that's a big challenge. So
I love that. That actually makes me want to, I think my ending comment, just so you can think about that, is it's going to be the business you thought you'd be in versus the business you actually are in, or the org you thought you'd be in versus what you are in. Because, you know, it's those memes like, this is what I thought it was going to be like, and this is what it is. Like, oh, I'm going to be like handing out food. It's like, I'm in manufacturing. So I'm going to come back to that. But I want to go back to the piece. I really, personally, this is one of my passions, is that this piece of human dignity and how each of you like think about that concept in doing this work and in scaling. So Frederick, I know I'll start with you because you mentioned that. So that was sort of the term that you brought to the table. But how has that concept of human dignity as you're looking to scale, like how has that been a filter? Has that been a touch point for you?
Well, if you can imagine the history of food access for underserved community, especially the food banks doing that work. Food banks been around since the 80s, roughly. The concept of a food bank, their mandate and whatnot. You would have a volunteer with a pickup truck, fill up the back of the truck with boxes, show up in a neighborhood and be like, hey guys, I got stuff in the back. What do you want? And that, what kind of experience and what kind of dignity comes in that process? And you're showing up there and you're like, yeah, a lot of people that could have used that service or that service did not, because they didn't feel, well, that's not really for me. That's for people who are really poor. No, there's a lot of people who could use these service. So if you start changing, a lot of food banks are doing a little stores now concept. So people walk in, they'll get tokens, blue, red, yellow, and you get so many chips, you go around, you pick up what you want. So there's a more dignified process. You still have to go to the food bank, but at least you get the choice of feeding yourself what you want. And the truck kind of does the same thing, where we're trying to recreate a farmer's market experience, put emphasis on the colorful display, a large display. When you're near the truck and you're shopping, the truck disappears. It really focuses on the fruits and vegetables. So I think and the most dignified process is when you can pay a little bit. Like, it doesn't have to be much. It could be a couple dollars. It could be $5, and at least from an operator standpoint, you get a bit of revenue to cover some of your costs, subsidize the rest, raise a little bit of fund, or have sponsorship with companies. Like, there's mobile markets that are doing employee wellness program, which they'll show up once a week, sell some vegetables, plus get a chunk of money, maybe $1,000 a week to show up, which is, it's good for the employees, good for the business. It's a wellness thing. And that covers the cost of lowering the cost of food. So if it's not a dignified process, there's a lot of people who don't feel that's for them. And unfortunately it is for a lot of these individuals or households. So yeah.
I love that. I love that as a frame for looking at what decisions to make. What does growth look like through this too? Gabrielle or Nancy, other thoughts or reflections on that? Gabe?
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts, I guess. I definitely think that that's a piece that we try to keep in mind. Full disclosure, Good Apple's a curated box. We aren't able to provide choice. That's how we're able to keep our costs low, is we just provide what we can get a solid deal on. That's in season. But a thing that we found a lot when we talk to our impact clients and even our customers as well, is that part of it is just giving people something that they didn't have before. A lot of the produce that we deliver to people is stuff that they weren't familiar with. And so we heard that and started creating little inserts and putting things inside of the box to help them know how to do it. There's an element of like trusting, I guess, people enough to, this is a piece of produce you may not be familiar with, but you can do it. Like you can make something out of this, and they do. And a lot of the feedback I hear from our impact clients is that it's fun for them. It's not purely about, I have food now, but it's also about, this is a fun activity that I can do. And, they're taking pride in being able to cook more, and gives like a sense of autonomy, a sense of like, self, for lack of a better way to put it, I guess. But I found that to be like surprising and really like inspiring piece of like what we were able to do with our give back programs is, giving people the opportunity to cook for themselves and grow and think outside of like, I guess what's, just put in front of them all the time.
Awesome. Thank you. Nancy, yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and we've always done inserts in our CSAs, and we continue to do it during feeding our neighbors. And now that we are out of feeding our neighbors, we're back to community harvest, and we're still doing that same thing. The other thing that we offered was cookbooks. We got the good and cheap cookbooks that are focused around using the amount of funds that are usually available for SNAP, like $4 or $5 a day. And so we included that with the CSA shares that were going out, had information about farmers, because we want to like bridge that gap between people being introduced to things that they may not have had before. And this may be the first time, but if they have the means, that they make that transition, they stay in the program and they continue to pay for it. And then we have some who've done that, but also have paid it forward. We have a program called, we have an option called Mad Love, and folks can contribute to cover the cost, paying it forward for someone else. And we have a couple of stories of folks who lost their jobs during COVID, and they got the no cost supported meals. And as soon as they were employed again and had enough income, they were signed up to pay for the meals, and they donated to pay it for someone else as their way of showing that generosity. And we try to ensure that we are meeting people where they are. So we have the produce that folks can get, and we have some folks that also want to introduce their kids to eating, where they may not know about it. So we try to include things, fun things around that for the kids to be involved, and that helps them want to eat the food because they are preparing it with the caregivers. But we also provide the prepared meals for folks who were dealing with COVID and didn't have the strength to cook. We also provide this support year round for cancer survivors. So if you're going through chemo or treatment, or your household is, everyone in that household we make 2 different meals each week, and you can get as many meals as you need, and we'll support everyone in that household for as long as you need that food. But we also have people who pay for those meals, $10 a piece. And again, they are plant-based meals, and we are fortunate to have chefs and cooks who help make these really tasty things. But it also helps to bridge that gap, because we've had people who started out with meals because that's where they were, and now they are getting the CSA because they want to know more about making that food themselves. But it also helps their self-sufficiency because now they know how to do it on their own.
Your programs sounds like you looked at a holistic view from A to point, like how can I better my community? And give a man a fish, feed him for 1 day, teach him to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Oh, main stage, 10 minutes. Okay. And I think that's I think every community should have an organization like yours. A food hub attached with food literacy, attached with deliveries, attached with fresh food access. And that's holistic. That's the definition of it.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody that makes this work. And all the things that you're doing are helping to fill those gaps too, because we all learn from each other. There are many people that poured into us and gave us their plan so we can incorporate it. We have about 10 different models that's a part of this. And then we do the things that we've iterated, we share that so it can be replicated as well.
I do have a question though. Is some of your programs have a social enterprise, like a revenue point? Okay.
Everything has a revenue point. That went down a lot last year, but our donations went way up. The original pro forma had us at about 70% income generation to cover the expenses. By now, didn't work out like that. I will be good as if in 5 years we're at 50%, because of the growth that it takes to do this. It keeps pushing that number higher. But new initiatives that we are getting involved in, we're using this to like reorient so that we get to that cash flow of being able to cover those expenses sooner. Right now, I think we're sitting at somewhere around 13%. The goal is to be at 25% next year and to start trying to step that up about 10% each year until we get to that 75% range. Initially, it was 90%, but with where we are as a community, we're not going to get there that soon. It'll be 20 years, but the goal is to get to the point where this is a responsive tool. So when we are building the capacity and the wealth building opportunities for the community, that this can turn into that income generation component where we are paying for everything as much as we can, and we don't have to have the charitable model that's contributing as much.
I'm just going to add this last. I think social enterprise is not all nonprofits, but one of the best model nonprofits can tackle, because if it's financially secure to a certain degree, then it's going to be here for years to come, and all the work and labor and pain and sweat and tears is not going to go in vain. In which we see a lot of some mobile markets, they go out of business 3-4 years down the road because it's retail, it's tough. It's perishable. You need to, get the coolers, do your product rotation. You need to figure out what to do with your carrots when they go bad at the end. Start dicing. So, anyway.
Gabe, did you have any comments, anything, or any questions? And I'll do a final round of questions in our last few minutes.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. I think the Good Apple model is supposed to be that, right? We want to be completely self-sustaining. But, similarly, like we're in a growth phase as well. And we find ourselves trying to make investments early on so that eventually, we can get to that point that we feel like we are, truly it's the community itself. Like literally our customers, they buy our boxes because they want to help their neighbors that live, maybe 15 minutes away from them in a totally different part of town. So I think that's a really huge piece of it is the investment part and figuring out how to make a model that can at some level of scale pay for itself, but two, find partners that will take you there along the way and that believe enough in the mission to get there.
I say decapitalizing food. Don't capitalize food, celebrate food. That's a business model around food access and helping your community should be not for profit, but in self-sustainable, but not for profit, I guess.
Yeah. I one of the other panel on one of the main stage sessions today, it was we're having these conversations about feeding people. Why is it so hard? It's just about getting people fed. And yet all these things have to happen. And you're like, oh, how do I partner with this person? How do I do this? All these barriers. And it's wait, it's everybody. Why is it so hard? It is something that everybody has to have. So two final rounds of questions. Jaya put in the thing, a little meme on expectation versus reality that I'll end with that. But because we're talking about, the different ways that you guys have been looking at scaling food distribution and scaling your programs, what's next for you and be able to scale to the next level? What is it, there's people who are listening, there's people putting it out into the world. What are the things that you're needing to scale? What does the next level of scaling look like? And what are the sort of the things that you're needing, whether it's resources or partnerships? I'm just sort of curious to hear. My clockwise from my screen. So we'll start with Frederic, Gabe, and then Nancy.
Okay. So for us, we work primarily with nonprofits. I'd say 98% of them, food banks or community food hubs, urban farms, Detroit, and a lot of places where there's a lot of need, a lot of a piece of equipment like a truck is not cheap. And so if we could find a financial partner who would see this as a social impact and make it accessible, finance a part of it or all of it, lease it, whatever that is. Right now we need to raise everybody that wants to start these programs. We help them raise the funds. We have a grants database, we do all that, but that's a ton of work to get these programs up and running. So if there would be somebody willing to help us out with that, help our customers out, that would be great.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Gabe.
Yeah, I've got two things really. One, I think conferences like these help us a lot because our whole goal is that, people that share these thoughts about food equity and the belief that food is for everyone, those are our customers. Those are the people that buy the boxes that ultimately help pay for food for people in their own community. So getting more of a consciousness about these types of conversations is kind of essential to our business model. We kind of want to do for food equity what Imperfect Foods did for food waste. And then the second piece, honestly, a hub like the one that Nancy's organization has would be super helpful for us as well. I think we operate, in margins a lot. We, have a delivery partner, we have a warehousing partner, but we don't have a lot of ownership over our own assets. And I think that would be huge for us to be able to take some ownership of that and start to make adjustments that are more convenient for us rather than trying to fit in between, the cracks of someone else's operations. So those are the two big things for a good apple.
Awesome. Great. And Nancy, taking it.
Yes. So thank you for all of those comments. It really does help for us to own it. And we're really grateful to those early donors that said that you need to own this in order to be able to move the way that you need to. And we've been really fortunate to have folks who say, here's the investment, do it the way that you need to do it. Not everybody does it, but enough where we can prove the case and then do it on an iterative level and then continue to move forward. We also are doing more sharing. Now that we've gotten to this level, there's an organization that we work with to grow some of our food that also has an internship program that's just starting an urban farm. And they want to have a kitchen, but they're within 5 miles of us. So we said, no need to raise the money to build that infrastructure there. You can come in and use our kitchen whenever while you're building your capacity. And as you figure out what you really need and what's really going to make that difference, then you can start to build that infrastructure in place. So it's once we have some of it, we need to actually make sure that we're sharing and we're collaborating and communicating. That requires trust, that we can trust to tell our dreams and our fears to each other so that we can help solve those problems together and maximize the resources that we have access to, but also be able to make bigger asks. We are partnering with other organizations now to make bigger asks. Might have asked for 50,000. They're asking for 5 million. And I'm like, if you can do it, go for it. I'm going to do what I can to help make that work. And that's where we're in now, is doubling down on that collaboration with those trusted partners so that we can push this forward faster now that we start to figure this out. And we're taking that intelligence from each of us so that we can plug in and hopefully help achieve this level of self-sufficiency and capacity as a community on a larger scale.
Wonderful. May all of us be making $50 million, $5 million revenues and deals and things like that. It's 4:00. I want to thank you, everybody who's still in this room. I want to send us all back. Please click on the main stage to see Joy and her closing remarks. Gabe, Nancy, Frederic, thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you do in the community and your heart and the dignity that you bring and everything. So thank you guys. And I'll see you at the main stage. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Jessica, for moderating.
Thank you.